Anyone in theory can publish on the web. Therefore, it is imperative for users of the web to develop a critical eye to evaluate the credibility of Internet information. Searching for sources on the www involves using a search engine, a directory, or some combination of these two. Because there is so much information on the web, good and bad, finding what you want is not an exact science and can be time-consuming. Developing a keen sense of the credibility of sources, based on such clues as connection of author to the subject, audience, source of publication, and documentation of supporting evidence, can also help you evaluate print and other types of sources. Though many search engines rank material according to their idea of what is relevant, that doesn't mean the material is relevant to what you want or is reliable. These guidelines are to help you become familiar with various types of web resources and the reliability of the information. So first, is there any evidence that the author of the web information has some authority in the field about which she or he is providing information? What are the author's qualifications, credentials, and connections to the subject? 2. With what organization or institution is the author associated? Is there a link to the sponsoring organization, a contact number, and/or address or email contact? A link to an association does not necessarily mean that the organization approved the content. Third, does the author have publications in peer-reviewed, which are scholarly and/or professional, publications on the web or in hard copy? 4. Are there clues that the author is biased? For example, is he or she selling or promoting a product? Is the author taking a personal stand on a social political issue, or is the author being objective? Bias is not necessarily bad, but the connections should be clear. 5. Is the web information current? If there are a number of out-of-date links that do not work or old news, what does this say about the credibility of the information? 6. Does the information have a complete list of works cited which reference credible, authoritative sources? If the information is not backed up with the sources, what is the author's relationship to the subject to be able to give an expert opinion? 7. Can the subject you are researching be fully covered with www sources, or should print sources provide balance? Much scholarly research is still only available in traditional print form. It is safe to assume that if you have limited background in a topic and have a limited amount of time to do your research, you may not be able to get the most representative material on the subject, so be wary of making unsupportable conclusions based on a narrow range of resources. And lastly, on what kind of website does the information appear? The site can give you clues about the credibility of the source. Some of these sources that we look at, for instance, are personal home pages. Personal home pages are maintained by individuals. They are often informal. Individuals can post their resumes, link to favorite sites, showcase their interests and ideas. Some personal websites also serve as professional sites. For example, many professors publish their syllabi, course material, and in some cases, their scholarship of their own personal websites. Entrepreneurs often advertise their services on home pages. Then the next type of site are special interest sites. These are usually maintained by nonprofit organizations or activists dealing with special issues, such as environmental concerns, legalization of marijuana, and much more. They can be relatively mainstream or radical in interest and vary widely in credibility of information. Then you have professional sites. These are maintained by institutions or organizations, sometimes by individuals. They can include research, reference sources, fact sheets. Many institutions provide such services to the public. The credibility of the institution or professional credential of the individual providing the facts gives clues as to the reliability of the information. Then we have news and journalistic sites, also sometimes referred to as e-zines, which include national, international news, online newspapers, magazines, and homegrown web publications. Anyone can publish his or her own news on the web. What do you know about, or what can you find out about, the reputation of the periodical? Is it an electronic version of a credible print publication? As in print, just because information is published does not necessarily mean it is true. And lastly, you have commercial sites. Although many legitimate businesses have websites, some are not legitimate. Companies with good and bad reputations are in the business of making money and acquiring and keeping customers. They are naturally biased in favor of their own products, so watch out for inflated claims for performance and qualities. There are two types of evidence. There's first-hand research, which is research you have conducted yourself, such as interviews, experiments, surveys, or personal experience and anecdotes. Then there's second-hand research, which is research you are getting from various texts that has been supplied and compiled by others, such as books, periodicals, and websites. Regardless of what type of sources you use, they must be credible. In other words, your sources must be reliable, accurate, and trustworthy. There's nothing more convenient than Wikipedia if you're looking for some quick information and when the stakes are low. You may get what you need from Wikipedia. In fact, some instructors may advise their students to read entries for scientific concepts on Wikipedia as a way to begin understanding those concepts. Nevertheless, when you're doing academic research, you should be extremely cautious about using Wikipedia. As its own disclaimer states, information on Wikipedia is contributed by anyone who wants to post material, and the expertise of the posters is not taken into consideration. Users may be reading information that is outdated or that has been posted by someone who is not an expert in the field or by someone who wishes to provide misinformation. When you locate a printed copy of a journal, information about the author and publisher is readily available to you. You can page through the journal and see what other types of articles it publishes, and you can often find out what credentials the author has by looking at his or her bibliographic information. If you are looking at the electronic version of the journal, you will need to click on the name of the journal for more information about it. In both electronic and print versions, you can see if a journal is peer-reviewed by either clicking on the journal title or by looking at the front matter in the print version of the journal. When searching for journal articles, it's best to find articles that have been vetted by scholars in the field. Editors of refereed or peer-reviewed journals send prospective manuscripts to scholars who specialize in the topics covered, and these scholars critique the manuscripts without knowing the identity of the author. If an author has made claims that are unsubstantiated or considered problematic by his or her peers, the manuscript may not be published. If, on the other hand, the manuscript is deemed rigorous in its argument, it will be published. The review process is meticulous and dispassionate. By contrast, journals that are not refereed publish manuscripts that have been reviewed only by an editor or editorial collective, and these manuscripts are not reviewed anonymously. In print sources, information about the editorial process is usually available near the front matter of the journal. In electronic sources, clicking on the journal title will usually lead to a page outlining the editorial procedures.